Frank Sabatella is a producer and director known for movies such as Blood Night, The House That Cried Blood, Night of the Pumpkin, but his most notable movie came in 2019 with the horror movie hit The Shed. Frank is a true student of the movie business to this day. He shares some refreshing and honest opinions and advice for anyone trying to follow their dreams. We also had the chance to talk about his favourite horror movies and the horror franchise that he would love to work on. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Okay, so can you remember the first horror movie you ever saw, or maybe a horror related experience? Like sometimes people have maybe stuff that's not considered horror, but they feel like it was the first thing that scared them.
No, I actually do remember the first horror movie I ever saw. I remember the incident actually rather vividly. The first horror movie I ever saw was Friday the 13th Part 2.
Nice.
And I was probably like 4 or 5 years old, and we were at my grandmother's on a Sunday. We used to have dinner at my grandmother's every Sunday, like the whole family. Mm-hmm. And, after dinner, like we would, the kids, me and my sister would go into the TV room. We just watched TV while all the adults did whatever they do. And Friday the 13th Part 2 was on TV, and we were just watching it. And I just remember being like horrified but fascinated at the same time. And the moment that stands out in my mind the most is when the guy falls into that trap and he's like hanging upside down from the tree. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then Jason comes and cuts his throat. I remember staring at that and being like terrified. And then my grandfather came in the room and he was watching. He looked at what we were watching and we were like, oh shit, we're going to get in trouble. But he didn't do anything. He just said, remember, that's all fake. And then he walked out of the room. And I vividly remember like my mind being like, okay, wait, if it's fake, what was fake about it? And like trying to figure out like how it was fake as like a little kid. And I think that started my fascination with like horror. And
what age were you at that point?
Probably about 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And would you say that like your fascination like, kicked off?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
And did it grow from there, or a lot of people say they kind of became like extremely scared, but kind of tried to dip in and out at times? Or did you? I don't want to say become obsessed, but
I really just stuck with it. Like I can't remember a time as like even as a kid, I was never into sports or baseball or any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. I was like, horror movies, monster movies. Like that was always what I loved. Even when I started learning how to write, I started writing scary stories. Like I still have old like papers I wrote from like first grade that are like little horror stories that I wrote.
Nice.
So it just kind of always remained a part of my personality, I guess you could say.
And when you got a little bit older, then would you have been like a video store guy or a collector of anything, like movies or anything like that?
I was definitely a video store guy. Like I loved, renting movies and stuff like that. I was never really like a huge collector. Like I have some cool horror stuff lying around, but I was never like, there are people out there that buy like tons of stuff and they buy everything. I was never really like that. But if I saw something cool that like I was into, I would grab it. You know what I mean? I used to love going to the video store though, just obviously for renting cool horror movies.
Yeah.
I grew up early 80s, so it was like prime time for like so picked a cool color,
Yeah. What can you remember some of your maybe favorite movies from back then?
I mean, definitely the Friday the 13th series was like a mainstay in my childhood. Carrie, Stephen King's Carrie always stuck out to me. I don't know why, but I used to watch it a ton. Freddy Krueger, obviously the Elm Street series. I pretty much just loved like any of the old great slashers.
Yeah.
Like even like bad slashers, I kind of have love for. Like even like Slumber Party Massacre, or like even like the lesser known, like really really like underground slashers. I can't even think of any right now, but pretty much anything that had like a killer in a mask and like, you know, like
Yeah.
naked girls running around and like people getting like hacked up. Like I just loved all that stuff. It was just a lot of fun to me. Sleepaway Camp is one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, me too. I'm a huge slasher guy. And like, I get some people, fans and different people that kind of maybe don't dig it as much. And I can't understand how I can watch a movie that has the same, you know, cliche kind of stuff. And I'm like, I can't even explain it.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's like getting a cheeseburger every time, you know what I mean?
It is.
Something good about it, you know?
So when did you decide then that movies was something like when did it change, I guess, to a serious consideration for you that this was what you wanted to do?
I think I have a similar story to a lot of directors where even like as like an adolescent and a teenager, I was like using my dad's VHS camera and just like making like stupid movies with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it became a serious thing while I was in college. I just started really thinking about like making more film, like actually making films, learning how to like make real movies. And I ended up doing a film with a friend. We shot on 16 millimeter on an old like crank handle Bolex. And from there, I was like, oh, I definitely want to do this. And I went to film school, and it just kind of like escalated from there, you know?
Yeah. And
I realized how much I loved it, and it kind of became the obsession.
Would you, I don't want to say recommend film school, but I've always had so many different people come out of it maybe with a different opinion. Some people think, nah, you know, it just made me realize I loved it, but the real experience was gained afterwards. Or is it something that you would recommend?
Well, okay, so I loved going to film school. I absolutely loved it. Mm-hmm. And also the real experience came afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So I look at it like this. Like I loved film school, and I think it was awesome, and it taught me a lot about like the craft and the technical aspects of filmmaking. It didn't really teach me, it didn't prepare me for the realities of making a film beyond film school, I guess, in a sense. Like everything you think you might know going into your first feature film, you're rapidly going to realize you don't know shit. At least that was my experience. You know what I mean? Like, so probably your first feature film is going to be your real film school, your education in film. I always say, I think both are good. I think that if you want to go to film school, totally go for it. You will definitely get something out of it. You will learn many things. You might even make some great friends, or you might learn an aspect of filmmaking that you didn't know you were passionate about, and it might help you move into that direction. However, on the other side of the coin, I say, if for some reason you can't afford film school or you can't go to film school, if you don't have that ability, I don't think you should feel bad about that, because I think in today's world, you have the option of giving yourself an education in so many ways. Like when I went to film school, it was 2002, right? So the entire filmmaking was a different animal then. Like we was still, pretty much everything was still shooting on 16 millimeter or 35 millimeter. So there were things you absolutely needed to learn. You needed like formal education on certain technical aspects. But today, with everything being so digital, and I mean, your iPhone can take 4K video that you can pass off for something great. You can learn anything online. You can find videos. You can find do-it-yourself stuff. I think the information is just so readily available, and the technology of filmmaking has been so demystified to a point that I genuinely believe you can become an excellent filmmaker without ever stepping foot into a film school, you know?
Yeah.
So I think really as an individual, the person needs to decide what's possible for them and what they want to do. You know, I was much younger at the time, and like I said, it was more, you kind of had to go to film school then, I believe. You probably don't have to go to film school now.
And if somebody were not to go to film school, or, you know, a lot of people that message me, the question always revolves around, what if I can't afford it, or should I put myself into serious debt? Is it something I need to do? If somebody maybe has decided they can't or aren't willing to maybe take on that debt, what would you suggest they do? Just start to create?
Yeah, I mean, just start to create. Exactly. I mean, if you're starting out and your goal is to be, let's just say you want to be a director, and you're like, all right, I'm a director. I can't afford film school. How am I going to make a film? Step one, write or get your script or whatever it's going to be. Either write it yourself or have someone that writes it. Step two, just start figuring out what resources do I have that I can make this. Now, chances are everybody has a phone. If you can't go out and rent a camera or buy a camera, you can use your iPhone. It's got 4K settings. Now, it may not look like the greatest movie on earth, but at least you're getting yourself into the process of doing it. So, you can go to YouTube and just put in search DIY filmmaking, do-it-yourself filmmaking, or how to do this, how to do that. You'll find hundreds of videos answering any question you may or may not have. You'll find books, you'll find resources. So I think once you have the desire and you're committed to doing it, just do it. And if it sucks, okay, fine, whatever, do it again. You know what I mean? Then make the next one suck less, because that's pretty much how it's going to go. I'm not saying your first thing is going to suck. It might be amazing. But if you finish the process and you're like, this kind of sucks, I didn't meet my expectations, that's okay. Most directors, certainly in the beginning, definitely don't meet their own expectations. But that's okay, because then you're like, you know what I'm going to do next time? I'm going to do this different next time, right? Now I know to do that, and now I know to do this. I think just the important thing is just do whatever you can, however you can.
Yeah. And for you then personally, when did it feel like, I know, and obviously being in the position you're in now, you probably always felt like a director, but when, I guess, to the outside world maybe, when do you think it really felt like, wow, this is real?
Like, when do I think like other people thought I was a director?
Yeah, like, or maybe when was it considered like a successful career per se?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm still not sure it's considered successful. I guess for me, my first feeling of success, I think, came after my first feature film. First film I did was a film called Blood Night, and I think when I completed shooting it and editing it, and it was like a finalized piece where it was just like, oh my God, this is done. I had a personal feeling of success. And this is before an audience saw it. This is before it did any festival screenings or anything like that. I just personally was like, I did it, for better or for worse. Here it is. Now I know I can make a feature film. So that was my first feeling of success and feeling like a real, genuine filmmaker. And in the years since Blood Night and all the things I've done since then, leading up to The Shed and beyond, I still struggle with those identity feelings of like, wait, am I a real filmmaker? Am I a director? Can I do this? I think you're always going to struggle with those feelings of conflict with yourself, or at least I am, because it's like I'll be really happy with something and then I'll see like another film that's like really good and I'm like, fuck, I'm like, I suck. That was amazing. But I think that's normal for an artist, probably in any field. You struggle with like imposter syndrome. You think, am I really good at this? Is this really something I should do? So I've not gotten myself to the level yet where I'm like 100% confident in myself as a filmmaker. I am looking forward to the day that I can say, now I feel really great about all of this. But I think it's a daily struggle. I think you have to remind yourself every day, just keep doing what you're doing, keep your head down, do the work, do the best you can. And that's all you can. Try not to compare yourself to others. Just focus on your objectives,
And that's something I've talked about many times, was imposter syndrome. Is there anything, I guess, other than what you've just said, is there anything that you use or to bring yourself maybe out of that? People sometimes talk about they get deep into it.
There's actually a couple of things that I try to do. Like, so I have a hard time, like, after my films are complete, I like don't watch them ever again. Like, I try not to watch them. Like, I just don't want to watch them. I feel weird about them. After I haven't watched The Shed in a little over 2 years since its first premiere in Citrus. I haven't watched it.
Wow.
But I about a year ago, or maybe it was a little more than a year ago, I rewatched Blood Night with a friend who was like, oh, let's just watch it. It'll be fun. And I hadn't watched that movie in like 10 years. And I was surprised at how many parts of it I actually liked. I was like, wow, I like a lot of this. So I think you have to remind yourself of the parts of your work that you do like. Kind of helps you keep feeling like, all right, there's stuff I like, and the things that I don't like, I'll fix next time. The other thing that I do, I find it helpful to write yourself a letter in a positive way. So you'll take I take a secondary voice, and I'll speak to myself as if I'm someone else speaking to me. So I'll write myself a letter saying good things in a way. So I'll be like, dear Frank, I just want to remind you today that you did this thing that was really great. And I know you might feel lousy about this, but if you look at it this way, and I find somehow that when I separate myself from it, and instead of saying, I did this, or I didn't do this, and I refer to it as, hey, you did this, you somehow you remove your identity from that imposter syndrome, and then you can kind of like parent yourself in a way. You know, you give yourself a little boost without feeling egocentric at the same time. Because that's something I also struggle with. Like if I do start appreciating my work or aspects of it, then I start getting worried. Like, wait, am I just being an egotistical, And it's like, no, it's okay to recognize what you like about yourself. But I just find it easier to speak to myself in third person. Makes it a little more, I don't know, makes it just feel better somehow. So those are my basic techniques. And they don't always work, but but when they do, it's good.
That's really interesting though, because I think that there's so many people out there who either had the potential to be great or were on the road to that might have just stopped because of feelings like that. And I mean, even, I'm sure there's probably times where, like you said, you make a movie and then you're like, should I have done this or shouldn't I have done this or whatever. But just even from looking back over your movies and stuff, I've had this experience several times when I've talked to people and then I actually see the person and I'm like, you don't want to, I guess, be a fanboy or whatever, but then to look someone in the eye and kind of say, I don't like using the word comfort movie, but, I was in a really shitty place or whatever, and some of your movies are in my escape, all that stuff. Yeah, I think it's really cool that those things are there, and it's nice when somebody can push past that feeling of maybe not continuing or, I'm not a real filmmaker, I'm not a director, I'm just going to pack this in.
I think whatever you tell yourself is what you are. It all comes down to your consciousness of being, right? What are you conscious of being? If you continue to say, I am not a director, I am not a filmmaker, I am not whatever, then you're not. I mean, if you don't accept it of yourself, why would the world? So it's important, even if you don't believe it, to say to yourself every day, I am that, whatever it may be. I am a director. I am a filmmaker. I am a cinematographer. I am an actor. Whatever your goal is, and whether you've done it, before I even directed my first movie, I was calling myself a director. Mm-hmm. I hadn't directed anything yet, but I knew I'm going to direct something, so I'm a director. And I had to convince myself of it. I had to convince myself of it first before I could convince anyone else that I was a director. My first film, I mean, I would imagine almost any director would go through something like that, because it's really hard to get your first film made because you've not directed anything. So you have to somehow project the confidence to somebody. So you have to prove confidence in yourself and prove vision. And I think the way to do that is to just consistently convince yourself more than anyone else that you are what you are, or what you assume to be.
And with your first feature, Blood Night, how did that all come about? How did, because I mean, you had Daniel Harris, Bill Moseley for a first movie. How difficult was it? On top of it being your first, big-ish movie, how did you pull that off?
It was pretty. I'm not really sure to this day how I pulled it off. No. So I had been meeting with like various producers for a while, and I was pitching another film that I was writing, another concept that actually never ended up getting made. I actually really loved it at the time, but it never got made. So I guess, I don't know. I probably didn't do a great job of selling it at the time. I ended up, a girl that I was dating at the time was working for a tech company, and their executives wanted to produce a horror movie. So she got me a meeting with them, and I was like, all right, I'm like, this will be like my 100th meeting with somebody that, probably not going to make the movie, and they're not going to do this, and they're not going to do that, but whatever. So I went in and I hit it off with these guys really well. They were really cool. I pitched them my idea. They were not into it. But I think because of my sort of confidence and my passion towards the idea, I think they liked me. So there was something about me that connected with them. And they were like, look, why don't you, they wanted to do a slasher film. And what I was pitching was not a slasher film. So I was like, all right, listen, I'm like, I love slasher films. I was like, so I'm totally down to do a slasher film. And once I got more of an idea of what they were looking to do with the film, and then I was like, you know what? I'm like, I have this old idea that I'd been kicking around, but I never fully formed. I was like, let me write that up and pitch it to them. And that's what eventually became Blood Night. So I put that together. I brought it to them. They were totally into it. They started organizing the financing and everything. And as the business aspect started rolling, I started thinking, I was like, I'm like, we can maybe get like some cool horror actors, I was like, Bill Moseley would be awesome for this, Daniel Harris and people like that. So we had our casting director just start reaching out. Now, we didn't really have the funds at the time to deal with them. But once our casting director started reaching out to them, we found out that they had interest. We were able to raise more funds based on their interest at the time. So once we had like a commitment from them, we got the funding together to bring them on board, and that like just took the whole thing to another level. It was really awesome.
Did that make things easier for you, I guess, feeling, like, yeah, okay, I'm about to do this, or did it add a huge amount of pressure?
It totally added pressure, because it added pressure twofold, because now I'm directing my first feature with two very experienced, iconic actors. And now what was initially starting out as like a pretty low, safe budget, the budget basically almost doubled itself. And I was like, oh my God, I was like, now I'm responsible for this like huge budget. And that was really scary to me, because now I was like, if I screw this up, I'm like, screwing this up for everybody. So it added a ton of like terrifying pressure, but I think that pressure also motivated me. It made me not that I would have been less of a director. I think not that I would have been less involved if we stayed with a smaller budget, but I think feeling the responsibility of the larger budget pushed me to push myself.
Yeah. And the concept for the movie, is that based off of I guess a real urban legend?
For Blood Night?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an urban legend. So there's an urban legend around here, like where I grew up in New York. It's two things. So there's the Legend of Mary Hatchet, which is this woman that is like supposedly killed her parents or something, and there's like variations of it, like she's seen wandering this road around here, or she's either seen in a cemetery, or if you see her somewhere, like you're gonna die. Like, so there's that little legend aspect. And then the Kings Park Insane Asylum is a real place. So there's all history involved in that too, and that's been abandoned for years. So I just kind of combined those two elements to create my own version of that scary legend.
I like that. I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well, and I actually didn't know that at the time.
Thank you.
I had heard it before, and I kind of assumed it was just part of the, I guess, the whole mythos of the movie. Until I went looking further, and then I was like, wait a sec, this is actually grounded in reality in a way.
Yeah, I don't know if it's reality, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an urban legend. But if you look up, if you want to find some interesting reading, just look up Kings Park Psychiatric Center, because that's that's like the psych center that Blood Night takes place at, and there's a lot of interesting information there. Just a history of it. It was like a farming community psych center, but there's all these like weird dark secrets about it and stuff like that. It's pretty fascinating.
Was you had mentioned before that you had this other idea kind of half baked. Was the idea always revolving around this?
No. The other idea I had, it was actually, so this was like 2006, I guess. It was very much similar to Stranger Things in the sense that it was those aged kids. They were out on bicycles and they were experiencing like this strange phenomenon in their town, which turned out to be this man creature that like lived underground in their town and would like pull people into the ground and like eat them.
Nice.
It was pretty cool. So it had like those vibes with where it's like these kids on bikes and they're like 12 years old and everything, and they're up against this like weird creature and nobody believes them and everything. But people weren't into it. I feel like if I tried to make that now, people would be like, oh my God, this is awesome. It's Stranger. It's just like Stranger Things, you know? So maybe I was a little too early with it. But
yeah, I was just going to say, it's funny now, I guess, hindsight, the fact that, Stranger Things are so popular. Movies like It. Yeah. That kind of, kids doing their thing, exploring, has kind of become a huge successful thing now.
That's like a classic, American suburban thing, like that's how a lot of us that grew up in the suburbs through the 70s and 80s and probably earlier, that's what our life was like. I mean, minus all the monsters, but I mean, as kids, we got on bikes, our parents weren't around, we just kind of did whatever we wanted. We ended up in these, abandoned places and stuff like that. And it's just good fodder for horror.
So once Blood Night, I guess, comes out then and starts to do the rounds, are you, I guess, pitching to places? Has anybody else approached you, or how did things look like the landscape for you from that point?
It looked really positive for a while, and then I just like, I was like pitching to people and just like nothing was taking. Like things were moving away from the slasher vibes. It was weird. Like it came out at a weird point in time where like horror kind of changed right after that. You know what I mean? Like, so going into like 2011, 2012, like the landscape of horror just kind of like took another turn. Like things started to be more and more like torture porn started being the thing. And like, I don't know. It just kind of changed. So it took me a while to get my next feature going. I did a bunch of short films in between just to kind of like have something to do and keep experimenting with style and things like that. But I started talking to my producer for The Shed. We started talking around 2013, 2014. We were talking about early versions of The Shed, and he wasn't fully attached yet. So while I was working on other things and continuing to polish The Shed, he eventually circled back around. Peter Block, who was a producer on the Saw films, ironically, he eventually came back around and was like, "Hey, why don't we let's really work on The Shed. Let's really hammer it out and get it done." And that's when things picked up again.
It's funny because I had seen some of your shorts, and I went back and watched them again maybe 5-6 weeks ago. Like Night of the Pumpkin, The House That Cried Blood. Have you ever considered? You probably have, but I couldn't help but feel like every time I watch one, I got this. I actually wrote down some of the like keywords, I guess like an adult Goosebumps, or Are You Afraid of the Dark, mixed with maybe vibes of something like Creepshow, Tales from the Crypt kind of feeling. Did you ever?
Such a huge.
Did you ever consider doing like an anthology or anything like that? I don't know. There's something about your shorts that I really like, and I was like, I wish I could see like a TV show kind of a feel where we could get more.
Well, so what I've been saying I wanted to do for a couple of years now is take those shorts and do a wraparound for them
Yeah.
and put them together as one collection. I would love to do that. And yeah, I mean, I would love to do some kind of a series like a Creep Show or something like that. I haven't pitched it anywhere, and now Shudder has Creep Show, so it's unlikely that they would want another anthology similar to that, but it's not out of the question. You know, I would love to do a series like that. I think it would be great. I mean, I grew up on Tales from the Crypt, the original Tales from the Crypts, and I love the original Creep Show movie. I would definitely love to do that. I haven't, admittedly, though, it's not something I've pursued. Maybe I should.
Yeah, I would love that. I just straight away, I was like, the first thing I thought was, I want all these shorts on a Blu-ray or something. That was the first thing. I'm like, I'm a huge physical media guy, and especially with, I don't want to call it indie, but indie. More like but it has more of a real, like a horror, or I guess a fan made, and I don't mean made by a fan, I mean made for fans of horror and fans of that style, rather than being maybe a cash-in Nightmare on Elm Street or a cash-in. It's all original ideas, original kills, stuff that you haven't really seen before.
Oh, thanks, man.
So okay, so from that point then things are kind of chopping and changing, and then you start to get the idea for the shed. Had you got that on the back burner, or was this something that started to develop after?
So the idea for the shed, funny enough, how I was saying earlier, like you meet people in film school, my aspect. So my buddy Jason Rice was a film school buddy, and he wrote a 10-page short story called The Shed. And it was really cool. We tried to make it after film school. We tried to like finance it ourselves and just make the 10-page short. And we shot some of it. We never finished it for various reasons. But the core of that concept kind of always like hung in my mind. So years later, after I finished Blood Night, I wrote another feature called Donna, which has yet to be produced. And then after I wrote Donna, I was looking for what my next project was. And I was like, you know what? I'm like, I've always loved that concept of the shed. I said, let me call Jason. And I hadn't spoken to him probably in like 2 years at that point, you know. And I just hit him up and I was like, hey, let's grab lunch. I want to talk to you about something. We went for lunch and I was like, dude, I would love to take that story and expand it into like a 100-page script, make a feature. I'm like, you don't have to do anything, because, you know, he kind of got out of the business and like pursued his own career path. I was like, let me take this. I'll run with it. I'll keep you involved every step of the way. I'll do all the work. And he was like, yeah, go ahead, knock yourself out. And that's what I did. So I took the 10-page story, I expanded it into the shed as you know it today. And, yeah, I mean, and then we made it, you know. I don't mean to make it sound so cut and dry and simple. There was like a lot of struggle and challenges along the way, but effectively that's what it was. It was a short story that I took the core elements of, and I just added a lot of, what's the word? Like, you know, subtext and metaphor, and just expanded it into way more like cool horror territory and hammered it out, you know.
How long, I guess, from that point did it take you to get to the final product?
So let's see. In the feature film, I started writing the first draft. I think it was around 2013.
Okay.
And Peter Block came on in 2016. So that was about 3 years before the producer signed on. It took me about a year, I'd say, to get it into, probably to write 2 or 3 drafts where I was like, all right, this is really good. I'm going to start shopping it around. Once Peter jumped on, me and him started talking about it in new ways. Like, again, the horror landscape had changed again. So we were like, how can we bring this more into today and still kind of make it smart and sharp and cool, but keep it still scary and fun? So then me and Peter did like rewrites for another 6 months or so, by the end of 2017, I think,
Mm-hmm.
we were starting to pull financing in, and then we shot it in the summer of 2018. So I'd say from first draft to shooting it and finishing it was about 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
would you say it was difficult to, I guess, see light at the end of the tunnel with something like that?
Yes. There were many times like in that 5 years when you have what I call the dark night of the soul, where you're just like, again, you're doubting yourself, you're feeling imposter syndrome. Like that, I would send that script out and I would get, from a variety of producers and production companies, I would get like amazing feedback. They'd be like, this is awesome, this is really original, this is really cool, but we don't want to make it. And I was like, okay, fine. Like I never had anyone read the script and be like, no thanks, this sucks. Everybody that didn't want to make it first told me how awesome it was. And I was like, so what's the problem? Like, why aren't we making it? And some people said like, oh, there's too many vampire movies. Vampires aren't cool anymore. And I was like, we're going to make them cool again. I'm like, cause we came from like the True Blood and Twilight era of vampires that were like, sexy and sparkly and smooth and suave. And I was like, no, I want vampires to be like bloodthirsty animals. So I don't really know. I never really got negative feedback on it. I got everybody that didn't want to make it loved it, which makes sense of that. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a bizarre one.
So I think that might've been even worse than I almost would have rathered somebody be like, dude, this sucks, and that's why we don't want to make it. I'd be like, fine, let me move on to something else then. But having so many people give me such positive feedback on it and still not wanting to make it, I was like, I don't know what to do. What am I doing wrong, And then fortunately, when Peter came on board, he even said to me, he's like, I always loved it from the first time I read it, so maybe we should make it. And I was like, yes, maybe we should. And that's when it's like once Peter got back on board, and me and him started working together, it just took on a whole new level. Like Peter had amazing insights. He had incredible notes. It was the first time I got notes from a producer that I felt really good about. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of times you get notes from a producer and you're like, what is this idiot talking about? What are they thinking? And it's frustrating. But with Peter, I'm not going to say every single note I was like, yes, but like I would say 90% of his notes were in line with what we were doing. It showed me he really understood the material. He's super thoughtful, super insightful. So that felt great. And that kind of like perked everything back up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I guess I was going to ask, was it, I guess, bittersweet in a way to have so many people praise it followed by, yeah, but we're not going to make it. And it's like, how many times do I do something before?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there could be some low points when you're trying to get a project out there because you're just look. I feel like nobody knows if a movie's going to be great or not. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't really know until it finalizes, until it's finished. Now, I always felt really good about the script, so I was confident of it, and I was just like. I'm like, why can't I like get other people to be confident in it? Even people that are saying they like it a lot. You know what I mean? So I don't really know what the solution to that is. I haven't figured it out myself because now as I'm working on new projects, I'm sure I'm going to go through the same hell of, like, hey, it's a new script. So I feel like unless you have like a tremendous smash hit that makes like millions and millions and millions of dollars at the box office, you're probably going to go through the struggle every time. And that's, I guess that's what takes the strength of overcoming imposter syndrome and all the other fears and doubts that you have.
Support First Class Horror on Patreon for as little as $1. Can't get enough of the horror? Carve yourself a deal from official merchandise, only on Teespring. Join us on all social media at First Class Horror. We have such sights to show you.